everybody, welcome to the channel, welcome to Garrett's Stock Thoughts. My name is Garrett, and today's video is all about the FANG stocks. We've got Facebook, Apple, Amazon, and Google, and I'm going to explain to you everything that you need to know regarding the antitrust laws that they're potentially violating and how that is going to impact their stocks and what you should do as an investor. So make sure to stick around till the end and watch the whole thing. So I'm sure if you watched the news at all last week, you probably saw something related to the FANG stocks. So Facebook, Apple, Amazon, or Google, and you like me were probably wondering what the heck was going on. All these FANG stocks had a pretty sharp decline, and there are some legitimate reasons for that. And the main thing that I want to discuss in today's video is the antitrust laws and why those stocks dropped so much and what exactly happened. So just to give you a little agenda, sort of what we're going to go through is the first thing we're going to go through is just a short and sweet summary of what are antitrust laws, why they are important, how they help the consumer. The second thing on the agenda is to go just real quick over what Google, Facebook, Amazon, and Apple are being potentially accused of. And the last thing is I'm going to give my recommendations as an investor of how you should handle this news, and if you own these stocks, what might be the best course of action. So let's jump right into point number one. Okay, so antitrust laws. All you really need to know about them are that they're laws put in place by the government to basically ensure that businesses are properly competing with each other. And the important thing about that is, when businesses have competition, it means that they're putting better products in the market. They are doing so at the lowest possible price, and these laws basically just protect the consumer. So I'm going to real quick read a quote from the FTC's website explaining why these laws are important. So these laws promote vigorous competition and protect consumers from anti-competitive mergers and business practices. Yeah, so basically these laws very important in that they are providing the consumer with protection so that companies basically don't collude with each other to provide less good of a product or higher prices than they would have otherwise. So really the thing to note here about these investigations is that they're so early on, and everything that these companies, Google, Apple, Facebook, and Amazon are being accused of is basically all speculation at this point. So I'll kind of go through and just talk about a little bit about what they're being accused of. So for example, Google is, they have 90% market share in search. So the FTC is exploring practices in search and how such a position of dominance is kept and maintained, how these practices affect competition. So for Apple, the big thing with them is that they control the App Store. So they kind of control, no one really knows what the government's potential concern is with Apple at this point. But in terms of the App Store, they control what apps go on their app store, how much they pay developers, they take a certain commission, and if a developer does not want to use Apple, they don't really have a choice because, Apple's the big dog. Every developer wants to be on the Apple App Store. Facebook, it's kind of pretty obvious. They've had problems in the past with using users' data inappropriately. I think they've been under investigation about that before, so that's a pretty well-known one. And then Amazon is an interesting one because so sellers have to pay for ads on Amazon, and that's really one of the only ways that you can kind of gain traction as a seller. I can attest to this personally. I have a small business that I run on Amazon, and the ads do help. It's not the only way to grow your Amazon account, but it's definitely slightly necessary. And Amazon then takes all this data from these ads and it can use it to make their own basically Amazon version of that product and then compete with you as a small seller. And there's a case to say, brick and mortar stores are suffering from Amazon, which, in my personal opinion, that's just the way that the world is going. I don't think it's necessarily illegal what they're doing, but that is just a small summary of, what these companies are being accused of and why these allegations are even there in the first place. So, and then I found a pretty good quote on the Huffington Post, and it says, so while the four technology companies, all worth hundreds of billions of dollars, have drawn scrutiny from regulators and lawmakers around the world, it was not clear what the U.S. Justice Department or FTC planned to focus on in terms of the investigation. So bottom line, a lot of these investigations are still very, very speculative, but the fact that they're even put in place is, it's still a risk. As an investor, you have to take that risk into consideration. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about if you own these stocks, what should you do? So if you're in the FANG stocks, if you're not in the FANG stock, there's really a couple options for you. So if you're in the FANG stocks, if you own Facebook, Apple, Google, Amazon, should you sell? Should you be buying more? And in my opinion, I think these allegations and these investigations are, like I mentioned before earlier in the video, they're very, very speculative right now, and there is a risk that they could turn into something worse. I would say worst case scenario, just a lot more regulation comes down, and these companies potentially lose money that they would have been making otherwise due to having to stop these practices that were deemed as violating the antitrust laws. So that's a potential downside for these stocks. The upside is, if nothing really comes from these investigations, then there's a possibility that you could buy more at a price that you would not have been able to do so otherwise. So, buy the dip, that's another option for you as an investor if you're able to stomach the risk of these lawsuits and allegations turning into something more serious. And another thing that you can do as an investor is, we have history to go back and look at, what sorts of other antitrust lawsuits have happened in the past. And I've just got a couple ones that I wanted to talk about real quickly. So just one big one that happened was with IBM, and the government investigated for 13 years and then dropped the case. So nothing really came of that. Another big one is AT&T. So the pursuit lasted 10 whole years. The company was then broken up into 7 smaller companies. And lastly, I think maybe the most well-known is when the FTC went after Microsoft for 12 years. And Microsoft ended up settling, and it was approved by an appeals court for the settlement. So, one common theme with all these investigations is, at least from the ones that I mentioned, none of them lasted less than a decade. So I think, if you're looking at that from an investment standpoint, there's one option of, do you want to deal with this for years? That's something that you have to consider as an investor. Or you could have the mindset of, a lot of these antitrust allegations, they lasted for so long, but nothing really came of them. Like IBM's case was dropped. So, just a couple things to consider as an investor and what you personally can handle. So if I was in the FANG stocks, I would probably be taking more of a buy the dip approach. And my personal risk tolerance level is, I think I could handle dealing with the risk of these antitrust laws becoming something that legitimately affects the earnings of the companies. But just looking back at the past, like, how often did that actually happen? Like, could this just be a good buying opportunity to buy the dip? And I would personally, I would probably maybe load up on a couple of the stocks. Like Google has just gotten absolutely slaughtered like the last couple of weeks. They've lost, I think it's like $40 billion in market cap or something stupid like that. It could be an opportunity to buy Google at a price that you would not have been able to otherwise. But if you're an investor and your risk tolerance is not nearly as high, then you might want to start unloading some shares, or at least wait for a little bounce back and then start unloading some shares. But bottom line is, it really, really comes down to your risk profile as an investor, your time frame, and you can make your choice based off of the information that I've given you, and just your risk profile and investing profile. So I want to know what you guys are doing. Do you guys own the FANG stocks? Do you guys own Apple, Facebook, Amazon, Google? Are you selling? Are you buying? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. I am genuinely curious to see what you guys are doing with these stocks. So thank you all for tuning in. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you all in the next one.